Climate Channel, Climate Actions Pathways, Episode 9, Climate Conversation on President Joe Biden's Climate Summit, convened on the Earth Day, April 22, 23rd. So what is our expectation from this climate summit, where 40 different head of the states and governments are joining? And already President Biden's special climate envoy, John Kerry, carried the letter of invitation to different capitals, inviting head of the states and governments. So there is mass expectations how best the return of the United States to the Paris Agreement will help galvanize the momentum for COP26 in Glasgow come November in United Kingdom. So we have in this conversation His Excellency High Commissioner, British High Commissioner in Bangladesh, Robert Chatterton Dickson. We have Bangladesh Environment and Climate Secretary Ziaul Hasan, NDC. We have LDC Chairs Office Representative Tenzin Wangmo. We have Felix Dodds, who has been a veteran of Rio and has been from North Carolina University, a professor, but he has been in the United Nations negotiation process for very many years, a veteran. We have Raju Pandit, Chetri from Nepal, who has also been in the climate negotiation for quite long. We have also Shah Rafayat Chowdhury, Footage Steps, Bangladesh, who has also been in a couple of conference of the parties on climate change, and also in Rio +20. And recently, he also was in Climate and Development Ministerial, convened by the government COP presidency in United Kingdom. And we have also Youth representative Maimuna Chowdhury. She is studying law. So welcome you all to join this climate conversation. Basically, what is our expectation from this climate summit? How to ramp up the momentum to reach net zero, to reach 1.5 degree world, how to approach net zero, how to reduce the adaptation gap, how to reduce finance gap. Can the climate summit hosted by US President Joe Biden will be successful and take us to Glasgow Conference of the Parties? I would now like to ask High Commissioner Excellency Robert Chatterton Dickson to kick off the conversation.
Great.
Your Excellency.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and good morning or good evening wherever you are in the world between Canada and Bangladesh. I was lucky enough, Secretary Kerry, or Special Representative Kerry as he now is, was in Bangladesh last week, and the American ambassador convened a small group of us to talk about exactly the subject we're talking about this evening. And I have to say, it was very hard, I think, not to be impressed by the very evident energy and commitment that Secretary Kerry brings to this role, because as he reminded us, he was first involved in climate and environmental issues right back in the 1980s as a US Senator. He was at Rio, he was at Kyoto, and of course he was involved at Paris. So he has played a crucial role in climate and climate diplomacy really for the last most of the last 4 decades. And he brings obviously tremendous commitment, but also tremendous background knowledge and a huge network of personal connections to this agenda. We're obviously delighted as the conveners of COP26, the presidents of COP26 in November, to have all that American resource and political momentum behind us, because I think Secretary Kerry was absolutely right to say that what we have in Glasgow in November is the sort of last best hope to change things in a way that will enable us to halt the warming of the Earth to 1.5 degrees and not see it shooting on beyond. And of course, we all know that a lot of the lights are flashing very bright red at the moment. And we have this final opportunity with the UK in the lead, working with our American friends, but also working with allies like Bangladesh to try to make the most of this opportunity. We can raise global ambition. And it's obviously a tremendously fruitful moment for that partnership, because we are the presidents of COP26 and Bangladesh is chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. So we hope that we can sort of meet in the middle between those who are affected in different ways by this huge humanity challenging problem. And what we're aiming to do as governments is to lead by example. What we've been focusing on as the UK is deepening engagement on both sides. Obviously, the pandemic has been a huge challenge. It's been announced today, in fact, that the air services are about to be suspended again in Bangladesh from next week for at least a week. So all the normal things that you would do as diplomats in these situations have been made very difficult. Normally, we're all about meetings, visits, trying to bring people together. And with the rare exception, like Secretary Kerry here over the weekend, that has become much more difficult. So we've been setting up a series of virtual visits for the lead ministers in the UK government to really engage in detail with their Bangladeshi counterparts. And as far as possible, we've also been trying to introduce them to the reality of life in Bangladesh, which is a country that is obviously hugely vulnerable to climate change, but is also a country that has a tremendously good story to tell on adaptation, and a country where there is a tremendous amount that can be done with nature-based solutions. The Sundarbans is obviously the best example of that. Of course, we all know that it's a tremendous natural barrier. We all know that it's tremendously important, the last big mangrove forest in South Asia, that mangroves have a particular role in carbon absorption. And we also know that it's quite threatened because, of course, there is a very large coal-fired power station about to open near it. So we've been introducing the idea of energy transition in Bangladesh. Bangladesh has joined the UK-led Energy Transition Council, which is designed to find reliable alternatives to investment in new coal-fired power stations. And I think we're getting somewhere with that, because if you look at where the energy planning was in Bangladesh a couple of years ago, it called for a very energy-intensive next phase of industrialization. Now, we all obviously recognize that Bangladesh has a tremendous need for power as it grows, but we can also see that it's an opportunity for Bangladesh to step off the high carbon route for that. So Bangladesh has joined, as I said, the Energy Transition Council, which is designed to look at alternatives to that. And we were very pleased to welcome the Honourable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to our Climate Ambition Summit in December 2020, which we hope is now going to be followed up on by the April event that is being hosted by President Biden, and will be another stepping stone towards Glasgow in November. So we are very pleased to welcome Bangladesh to the Energy Transition Council. We're also very pleased that Bangladesh has been hosting events as chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, and in particular, looking at adaptation and climate action for the most vulnerable. So picking up on this particular area where Bangladesh has more to offer than anyone in terms of experience and commitment. And we picked up again on that with a ministerial event on climate and development just a couple of weeks ago, at which we were very pleased to welcome Foreign Minister Momen. And we'll be taking forward, as a result of that climate and development ministerial meeting, proposals for responding to climate impact, which includes operationalizing the Santiago network on loss and damage ahead of COP26. We know that loss and damage is going to be a difficult issue. Clearly, in the UK, we arguably were the people who invented the Industrial Revolution. And so we probably have more historic responsibility than almost anyone for the carbon which is in the atmosphere. But what we want to do is work with countries which have the opportunity now to take a different approach, including Bangladesh. When you look at the adaptation side, we have been very welcoming of the Honourable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's launch last year of the Global Centre on Adaptation, and it's great to have the regional office for that. The regional office for South Asia here in Dhaka, and our own regional COP26 ambassador spoke at the inaugural event to that. And the other thing we've been doing.
Yeah, I think, Excellency, you can come back again.
I'm out of time. Okay, well let me just in that case give me 3 points. The first point is we know this is really important and we're working very hard on it. The second thing is that we think we have an incredibly valuable partner in Bangladesh in all sorts of ways, whether it's on adaptation, loss and damage, energy transition. And the third thing is that we're really getting on with it. I mean, we have a very dense network of ministerial connections already established, and it's great that we're working with our American and Bangladeshi friends to make a reality of this, given all the things that need to happen between now and Glasgow in November. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for setting that tone. I would now like to request Tenzin Wangmo from Nepal, from Bhutan, from LDC Chair's office. She will reflect the expectation of the least developed countries, a major group in this process. What is your expectation from climate summit convened by President Biden?
Hello and greetings to everyone. So thank you, Mr. Chowdhury, for reaching out to the LDC group to share our expectation from the Leaders Climate Summit to be convened on Earth Day. So firstly, I want to start by saying that the LDC group welcomes the re-entry of the United States to the Paris Agreement. A bold, cooperative global response is urgently needed to address climate change. And we look forward to US leadership to fight the climate crisis. So in this respect, we also want to welcome the Climate Leaders Summit hosted by the President of the United States, Joe Biden. As all of us know very well, the science is robust and clear, and the most vulnerable countries are suffering a lot. This is no longer a talk, it is a reality for us. But, it's very disheartening to see the result of the very recent synthesis report published by the UNFCCC Secretariat. And the report shows that the collective global ambition is much lower than what the IPCC science tells us is needed, which is global emission reduction of about 45% by 2030, if we are to limit global average temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So therefore, the LDC group has a lot of expectation, especially from the summit. We are expecting US to make a very big announcement with a very ambitious NDC in line with 1.5 degrees Celsius. I think US should lead by example. We also expect US to galvanize support of the world major economic leaders to submit the enhanced NDC and build back better for a genuinely transformative green recovery to deliver stronger climate, sustainability, health, and economic outcome. We are also expecting scale-up climate finance to support the developing countries to adapt to the changing climate and also to build resilience as well as to support loss and damage. More importantly and very urgently, I think we need to work together to make COP26 a success. So the Leaders Summit should build the momentum to put the world back on track of global emission reduction of 45% in the next decade if we are to achieve the global, the Paris goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius. I'll stop here for now, Mr. Chowdhury. Yeah.
Thank you, Tenzin, for articulating the LDC's expectation from the summit. I would now like to hear from Yat, Maimuna Chowdhury. What is your expectation as a student?
Well, the expectations are very high regarding the U.S. re-involvement into the Paris Agreement, seeing that they have come back after so long, right? So what we expect is that there is a high degree of involvement by the U.S. government, as promised by Joe Biden in his election promises. So what we expect is that the intergenerational gap between the uh, between the resources that we get from different generations. We wish for more equity in that, right, as we move forward into the future. So hopefully we can work towards that in the next climate meeting as well.
Thank you, Shiv. Now I would like to ask Felix. Dorsey, you have been in this process for many moons. You know the tricks, you know the tricky parts. So what is your expectation? As a citizen of United States, do you think President Biden, given the Republican opposition in the Congress, in the Senate, can deliver what he has promised in his election campaign? Even his international leadership. We know he has been in this process also, in the international negotiation for very many years. From his youth, he has been. So, what is your expectation? What is your take?
I think optimistic, because we heard the rumors at the end of this last week that the US target may be as much as 50% reduction in CO2 on 2005 by 2030. If that's the case, that will show leadership. It will, in a sense, mirror the leadership that China's made with its commitment to net zero by 2060. So I think we should recognize the role that China's playing in that. Also, Mark Carney's talking about a global banking climate pledge to be announced at the Biden summit. And I think we have to look at private sector finance as an area that really does need to move forward. And there's a Glasgow private finance accord, which is coming from a lot of the investors, which is looking to be announced at Glasgow, which would align capital markets to support funding, particularly things like the transfer of new technology. I think one of my concerns is the issue about, can we have proper negotiations if they're virtual? The Convention on Biological Diversity announced today that they will have 5 weeks of virtual negotiations starting in May. But I think there's a problem with that, as all negotiators will know, the need to be able to be in corridors, to be able to move things forward, to build trust. Really important. And so I suggested in the article that Politico picked up that we looked at some type of bubble in Italy for the whole of October, which would enable negotiators to prepare really quite extensive suggestions prior to the G20, which happens in Italy at the end of October, and would allow leaders to make really important contributions to where the negotiations were prior to Glasgow. Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to request Bangladesh Environment and Climate Secretary Ziaul Hasan. What is your take? What is your expectation? You have been.
Okay, good evening from Bangladesh. Greetings to all the distinguished participants. Thank you so much. This is very much pleasuresome for us that the US government has already rejoined the Paris Agreement, and the US presidential Special Envoy, Mr. John Kerry, recently visited Bangladesh to invite our Honorable President, Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to join the upcoming Leader Summit scheduled on 22 to 22nd of April this year. He also met the Honorable Foreign Minister, Honorable Environment Minister, the officials of the 11 ministries, and also some climate experts. His speech was very much encouraging. He made a declaration that the US government plans to reduce carbon emission, plans to go to net zero emission by 2035. And we came to know that US government already committed to make finance to $2 billion US outstanding finance. As a country, Bangladesh is very much climate vulnerable, and Bangladesh is trying its best to adapt to the adverse climatic situations. And Bangladesh government has formulated Bangladesh climate change strategy and action plan, and to implement the plans under the strategy, Bangladesh government has established Bangladesh Climate Change Trust Fund in the year 2009, and every year we are adopting projects under the fund. In the upcoming climate summit, it is encouraging for the climate vulnerable countries like Bangladesh and others that we are getting the leadership of the US government, a very pragmatic role, and we like to see that under the very able leadership of the US, the other more emitters of the globe will come to a consensus, to a convergence to go for net zero emission, and there'll be example for the developing countries like Bangladesh and other developing countries who have other priorities like eradicating poverty, making provisions for health, education, and also have development aspirations. They will follow the path made by the more polluting countries and the rich countries, and we hope that through this summit, the industrialized nations will come to a consensus that they will go for making provision of enhanced finances, so that the developing countries who are fighting to combat the impacts of climate change will get adequate finance and technology from them, and will try to transform to a better scenario. For now, this much I would like to start.
Okay, thank you. I would now like to ask Shah Rafayat Chowdhury from Footsteps, Bangladesh, who has been in the Climate and Development Ministerial convened by the co-presidency. Shah, what is your expectation?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this crucial discussion. Most of you all don't know me over here, so I'll give a brief introduction of myself. My name is Shah. I run a next generational organization called Footsteps, where we design innovative solutions to address various sorts of community and social challenges that exist in our communities today. And climate action is one of our key focuses over here. we basically, and specifically us, we focus more on disaster resilience. Like, how can we adapt to natural disasters that are being increased by climate change? So key focus for us in that sense. So we see ourselves more as actioneers than advocates in this scenario. And by being on ground, what we're able to see is that we can actually turn these disasters or these scenarios into economic opportunities. For example, like we're working on flood disasters where we create portable filters, which can convert flood water into drinking water. And we're teaching rural women how to use them so that they can be emergency respondents and sell the water in their rural markets. See, the thing is, these sort of solutions exist within not only the youth, but also in the private sector. So when it comes to the question of what's like the youth's expectation for at like COP26, it would be a question of how much are we going to be involved in this entire conversation? Because it is always mentioned that youth needs to be a big process of this conversation, but at the end, that is not the reality, because more youth are missing out. More youth who are actually working in this field are missing out of being a part of this vital conversation, who can actually make a difference. So it has been said that COP26 is going to be the final year where action needs to be taken. And in order for that to happen in reality, more youth organizations, more private sector participation also needs to be present over there in order to ensure that actions are able to take place wherever necessary. And that is why I'm requesting anybody who is present within this conversation to have more youths involved, have youths who are working on climate action be a part of this conversation from all around the world, have them meet, have them share their ideas. Because at the end, climate change is a next generational problem requiring next generation solutions. And in order to solve this next generational problem, you ultimately need the youth to be participating over here. So thank you. That was all from me.
Thank you. Thank you, Shah. Raju Pandit Chhetri from Nepal, from the mountainous countries. What is the expectation of the mountainous countries?
Thank you, Quamrul, for inviting me to this panel discussion, and namaste to everyone from Kathmandu. Good to see you all. Excellency Dickson and Secretary Hasan and all the panelists. It's great to be speaking with you all today here. Well, for me, coming from a mountainous country and a least developed country as well, I think it's very exciting to see the leadership after missing for 4 years of the United States coming back again. I think this is quite encouraging for every one of us. And as Madam Tenzin very rightly said, there are quite a high expectation now with US on board, and especially UK is the incoming presidency. I think there's quite a lot of excitement, but I do understand also the nervousness that we have because of the COVID situation here, because the kind of momentum that we would have taken because of this has really put us behind. But having said that, I think there's a lot of expectation going forward. Well, first of all, I think one of the big thing about US coming on board is that, of course, the present envoy, John Kerry himself was the I would say, an architect of the Paris Agreement in 2015. And it will also be, I do remember very well that it was also for the adjustment of the United States that, instead of having a protocol, we had this agreement because they would be able to pass this through their Senate, and that's how it would move forward. And unfortunately, just after a couple of months of having this passed through, the US dropped out. And there's a lot of sadness, or let's say some kind of nervous about how we move forward, because as Madam Tenzin rightly said, the science was very clear where we were going. But at the same time, the major emitter and with the highest historical responsibility was moving away from its responsibility. So there was a lot of this trust issue. But now, as I said, with US coming on board and with incoming COP presidents as UK coming on board, I think there's quite a lot of excitement. Alok Sharma, who is the incoming COP president, was also here in mid-February in Kathmandu. He met with a lot of our leaders and also visited at the local level. So I think this is a good momentum. But coming from a country like Nepal, where it's highly climate vulnerable, we have had a lot of floods. Last year, almost 356 people died from floods and landslides alone. 100 people were still missing. There was a report that came out to say that out of in the major 3 river systems here in Nepal, 47 glacier lakes in the mountains are at the verge of outbursting. 21 lakes just fall in Nepal, and while one is in India and the others 25 were in China. That was just the systems in Nepal. So recently we are suffering from huge forest fires because of the drought and not timely the pre-monsoon rain. So all these things are coming. So there's quite a high expectation that now with the US on board, there's a big, I think, gap to fill as well because of the Trump administration, whatever has been left out. And I would just want to list a few things that we have high expectations, especially for my country and also for the group of countries, the least developed countries.
Can you come back again? in the second round, you can say those. Raju? Okay,
sure.
then. Yeah, as you said, that in Paris, John Kerry was instrumental, especially the loss and damage. That negotiation, he tried to convince the developing country parties, especially the least developed countries and also small island developing states, not to go for compensation and other things. So that negotiation he led from the developed countries. And also, we know during the Kyoto Protocol, as I still remember, Ambassador Raul Estrada of Argentina was sharing. He was chair of the Committee of the Whole. He asked one night to join him, and we walked down to the room of Al Gore, vice president at that time, and he was leading the US delegation. And on behalf of developed countries, he argued that we should try to make a little bit flexible the Kyoto Protocol. Because of their Senate, Congress, it will be difficult to sell them. So we also agreed at that point of time during Kyoto Protocol negotiation on the final hours. And that way, Kyoto Protocol was signed, and he signed, Al Gore signed that. But after returning to Washington, D.C., he got defeated, or he made the concession. And then again, from Kyoto Protocol, we know the United States walked out. That weakened the Kyoto Protocol, which the United States negotiated with the developing countries. And also this time, United States defense during Trump administration also hurt the implementation of Paris Agreement. Hope the return of the United States, we have the momentum, but how to keep that momentum so that the COP26 will be a productive one, can make us break, can make a success. High Commissioner Robert, Excellency. Yeah, Robert.
Yes, indeed. Sorry, still after a year of Zoom, I'm still having trouble with the mute. No, I think you asked exactly the right question, and this was what we were discussing with Secretary Kerry while he was here last week. Because what we know, obviously, is that there's a huge problem, and there is a lot of political momentum, but there is still a lot of uncertainty, and in particular, as we were saying, Secretary Kerry was, without being too statistical about it, he said that he was expecting that the US would be putting forward a very ambitious NDC of their own in the next couple of weeks. That's obviously very important. And clearly there are other large emitters. The crucial thing, I think, if you come down to it, and I think Bangladesh does have an important part to play here, more and more you find yourself coming back to coal. Coal is an enormous problem everywhere in the world, and clearly many economies have been able to wean themselves off coal, but coal remains an important part of the energy plans for significantly large and fast-growing economies. So I think if you're looking at the sort of challenges and where you need to apply the political momentum, that's probably the single area that is most important. But of course, we know that this is a multifaceted problem. There's all these aspects around mitigations, adaptations, nature-based solutions. You know, there is so much to this. And so it's a question of applying the momentum to meet the scale of the problem, but doing it through, you know, the meetings that are now set up. So I think, you know, I'm hoping that our own contribution to the ministerial meetings that we've been hosting will be matched by the contributions that we hear from the 40 major emitting economies at the American summit later this month. And then there will be more opportunities to build on that before we have the sort of climactic moment at Glasgow. And I would like to come back to something Felix said, which I think is absolutely right, is that, you know, I think the lesson of major political agreements in these very complicated areas is that you need people in the same room. And I must say, the idea of getting people together in a bubble, if that's what's necessary by then, in Italy, that sounds like an extremely good approach to developing the sort of human contact that's going to be needed if we're going to be able to make the very difficult compromises and decisions that are going to be needed.
Thank you. Tenzin. Tenzin. Yeah, Tenzin, can you hear me?
Sorry. So I was on mute. So you're asking like the expectation for COP26? Is this something that you're asking? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think as the British Commissioner mentioned, I think it's very important to build the momentum. I think especially for the LDCs, we have a lot of expectation and also the priorities for COP26. For firstly, like as I already mentioned, that we need to see enhanced, more ambitious NDCs delivered, which reflects each country's highest possible ambition and also their respective fair share, as well as the long-term strategy to put the world on track to meet the goal of the Paris Agreement. Because I think this is something that has to be delivered at COP26. Otherwise, like this was supposed to be delivered last year, but because of the pandemic, I think it has been already delayed by 1 year. So we can't wait another few years to put the action. And also, we also need to have a very clear information on the 100 billion goal of commitment, because this is something, especially for the developing countries, even if you put a very ambitious NDCs, it is contingent on the availability of the resources. So the delivery of the 100 billion goal is very important. And for the LDCs, adaptation should be addressed in a very balanced manner with the mitigation. And also action and support for loss and damage is very important. And finally, I think there are a few remaining rules on the Paris Agreement, such as we have rules Article 6, we have common time frame for the NDCs and also the enhanced transparency framework. This should be finalized at COP26.
What's the international mechanism for governance?
Yeah, this remaining rule has to be completed at COP26 so that we are able to secure a very secure transparency, we're able to safeguard the environmental integrity, and also ultimately ensure that the necessary deep reduction of the global emission and increased capacity for adaptation to climate change. So these are very important, and this is something that we feel that has to be delivered at COP26, because this was supposed to be delivered at COP25, but somehow this could not be delivered. But we really hope that it will be all completed at COP26. Yeah, thank you.
So Maimuna. Maimuna. Are you? Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Sir, what was the question?
So what is your expectation for COP26 and also the climate summit?
Well, as per His Excellency has mentioned that the pandemic is a challenge that needs to be addressed in terms of communication as well as like negotiation. Uh, we feel like as a youth that this is the step that is very important, and this is a very good opportunity to have the transitional period that would allow us to move forward with all the development goals in moving forward with the reduction in carbon emission. And we believe that if US does fulfill its promises, then we can have leaps and bounds, and 2026 the 2026 uh, uh, climate negotiation need not be the last one to come. Thank you. That is all from me.
Thank you. So, Felix, you are an old hand. Felix, the diplomatic sound of French diplomatic sound. We have noticed during the negotiation of Paris Agreement. So this time, the sum of diplomacy from the United States as well as UK, the British, they know the diplomacy. So how best that will have a good marriage and can deliver good outcome in Glasgow, come from say climate summit.
I think that the High Commissioner has some very important role with being the British host of the summit, and I think there are a few things there that for me are really important. I loved the comments on loss and damage. I think clearly that is a huge thing, which if the British can play a critical role in, that will be really, really important. I think the use of the Commonwealth as part of that conversation would be very useful. But I think there are a couple of things that are missing that I'd just like to raise. One is I think it's very sad that the UK is hosting the summit when it's cut its overseas development aid from 0.7 to 0.5, which is having a huge impact on climate research in the UK universities and their association, as well as with the NGOs that are working on that. I think that's something that needs to be looked at. In the development minister's roadmap, which I thought was excellent, that was produced a few weeks ago, there seemed to be no recognition of the role that the Convention on Biological Diversity could play on the issue of nature-based solutions. And now that they're going to be meeting for 5 weeks, I think it's absolutely crucial that the UK use those virtual meetings to advance the issues that they care about in the nature-based solutions. I think that you have this amazing possibility. You've got the Biden summit, you've got the G7, and you've got the G20, which fit into this process. And so there are points where political leaders can make really important pushes. But for that to happen, the UK, I would say, needs to reverse its decision on reducing overseas development aid in this period when we're trying to hit not just 100 billion, but a lot more. A lot of that will come from other sources, from private sector, but we're looking at trillions that we need to realign using the capital markets to help, and particularly to help those that are least developed and enable them to make the right pathways towards a sustainable future. Thank you.
Felix, during our previous round of negotiations, we have seen that to make a negotiation quite productive, we need to engage the negotiators for say 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks negotiation over the years. But this time, for last say 2019, we are not meeting physically because of COVID. We lost entire year last year, and also this year we have lost 4 months. So that way, our negotiation time reduced to a minimum. So how best we can expedite our work, negotiation work, and how to have that, say, capacity built in this process of negotiation is a monumental task, Herculean task. And that way we need, because for cracking the hard nuts, we need a lot of negotiators, seasoned negotiators, who can deal those issues, say physically, try to convince each other, try to hammer on, push on. That is essential, and that requires experienced hands over the years who know the tricky paths. So we need that kind of solid negotiation.
So could I just comment quickly? One is you've got the bureau meeting happening, I think, on the 15th of April. They, I'm sure, will try and go for a virtual meeting in Bonn. And I think that there's an argument to have some form of virtual meeting in June where member states have the opportunity to place their statements into the negotiations and the development of some text out of that. So that will be important. But I hope Robert will pass the comment about the virtual meeting back to Capital, because we suggested in the IPS article, which Politico picked up, which was that basically the whole of October should be a bubble for negotiators in Italy. And that then allows the G20 to do some really important work at the end in Madrid to align some of the key economic countries, so that when they arrive in Glasgow, you know, they've had that big extra political push. Thank you.
Ziaul Hasan.
Okay, on the expectation from the summit, any issue?
No, you can move to COP26. So what is your expectation from COP26?
Okay, Mars have been told. I was listening to the expectation based by Tenzin. It was very well said that the industrial nations, they should come forward and they should be committed in a true sense, that, and they should realize that they can be the booster of the activities for the other partner countries, and they should really go for implementing net zero emission preferably by 2050, so that the other countries with special circumstances, other vulnerable countries, they can follow them and they could be encouraged. And I will again say that we will expect a very positive pace to support the vulnerable countries with finance and technology. So this was my.
Thank you. Shah, what is your expectation from COP26 in Glasgow?
Thank you again. I think I answered in my previous turn, but I'll stress on some other parts as well in this case, like being somebody who was trained by Al Gore a few years ago and being somebody who campaigned rigorously for Bernie Sanders when he was standing for election during my college days. I can say that America being a part of this conversation again is actually a very big plus point, and everybody, I'm very sure, agrees to this. But again, I would like to stress the fact, like, there are some other sorts of summits happening all around the world. For example, the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, etc. What I'm trying to say is that this entire conversation regarding climate change and climate action is becoming exclusively political to a certain extent. So I think if we are to change or address this global issue, it needs to be diversified into other areas and sectors as well. Because if it is too political, then what role do we have to play in this conversation as well? Because I feel like climate change is a problem for everybody in the world, and climate action needs to be taken by everybody and not only governments of different states, whether it be from developed nations or developing nations over here. Because I do believe that we have the ideas and the capacity to ensure that we can come up with ideas about renewable energy, about climate resilience, about disaster response, in order to ensure that we have the vision of, we create the reality of a beautiful world in the future where we are 100% on renewable energy, there's 0% pollution, and the world is sustainable at the end result. So what I would say that my expectation for COP26, again, would be that more youth, more private sector needs to be part of the conversation. And this entire summit needs to expand beyond the horizons of being just a political game over here. And it needs to be the game of the common people. So that is my expectation from COP. Thank you.
Thank you. Raju Pandit.
Thank you. Let me take the floor again. Just on the Climate Leaders Summit, one point I wanted to raise was, I hope President Biden, whatever has been committed, is really shown at this summit. And that's very, very key, because in terms of leading the political momentum and also building the trust is very important. That's, I think, very key. And then that momentum is built in a way that US actually takes leadership. And I would also go a little further to say that not just include 40 countries that has been promised for, that has been invited for the upcoming summit, but then there's a process to reach the other countries as well. Because I think, as Shah very rightly said, this is just not the action that the 40 countries should take, but it's much more greater than that. Well, going to the COP26, one of the things that really has to be delivered is on closing the gap on mitigation, because now what is being promised and what the Paris Agreement really envisions as a goal of 1.5 degrees is not compatible at all. And especially, it seems that the poorer and smaller countries like the LDCs and other vulnerable countries are taking more actions than the ones who are were supposed to be taking more, their enhanced NDCs. And this has been very clearly seen in whatever the enhanced NDCs that have been submitted late last year. I think so that has to be a very key factors if you want to really meet the objective 1.5 degree and also meet net zero emission by 2050. The other one is the finance gap. And this is a very, very key aspect. And why I say this is a key aspect, basically because even if you look at US now, they promised $3 billion to Green Climate Fund in the first initial resource mobilization. Obama administration gave $1 billion. $2 billion is still pending. But in addition to that, other countries like the UK or the other European bigger countries have doubled their contribution from the initial resource mobilization. That is left. So that big, huge gap has to be filled in, apart from other things. So I think going to COP26, that leadership, that fulfillment is very, very key. Because if you see the 2020 report that came out of 2018 OECD report, only $78.9 billion has been delivered. And of course, we are way behind in terms of meeting the 100 billion goal in totality. Apart from that, for a country like mine, access is a huge issue. Meeting that commitment is a huge issue because we make NDCs and we make climate actions to be done, but then without proper financial or the capacity building or a technological support, this is not achievable. So I think the finance has to be there. The other part is, as other speakers said, the loss and damage issue, because this has been swept under the carpet for very, very long. That can no longer happen. Because if you look at the extreme events that's happening all around the world, now this is an issue. We're not just talking about adaptation now. The adaptation has been a little bit of a back issue, because now the kind of extreme events that is happening currently, loss and damage cannot be swept under the carpet any longer. It has to be in the forefront of the table of negotiations, backed by finance, commitment. I think it should also be in addition to $100 billion that has been committed, and this has to be delivered. Without these major things, I think that COP26, if it happens in person, is very, very unlikely to succeed. And these are the very key factors going forward. That's what I can sense. And finally, if it is held virtually, I think our group of countries like ours, LDCs, are the ones who is going to really, really suffer. Of course, you can have informal sessions, discussions online that can always continue. You need to build trust and understand each other. But if a decision-making session is done virtually, I think we're the ones will be really losing quite a lot. And it's not just for us, but I think many, many developing countries are going to suffer that, and that's what we shouldn't allow that to happen. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Raju. Tenzin, what is your final take? Final words, final message for the Biden summit and also for COP26. Final message.
Before that, maybe just to highlight on the process, as Raju said, yeah, at least for the LDCs, I think what we have been communicating, because we had bilateral with EU, we also had bilateral with US, and we also had a lot of discussion organized by the co-presidencies. So what we have been communicating to them is the LDCs have a lot of issues. We have like connectivity issue, we have the bandwidth issue, we also have the time zone differences. I guess time zone differences is there all over the world, but we also have affordability issues. So we have a lot of issues. That's why like we have conveyed to them, but at the same time, we don't want to hold back the process. So what we have been communicating them is we would like to have a technical informal discussions continue so that we reach a very good understanding. And also we want the discussions to be captured so that it's not just a discussion, but at least something is being captured. And then at least by the time we reach Glasgow, we have something reach that level of understanding to make a decision. So I think this was the message that we have been conveying, at least from the LDC's point of view. Maybe my last message is, yes, definitely COVID has delayed the process, but I think we have to take actions. So that's why like it's important that, and it is also urgent that we come together to make COP26 a success, although there are a lot of difficulties, but I think we should all come together so that we are able to put the world on track of achieving the 2030, achieving the the 2030 NDC in line with 1.5 degrees Celsius. So I think that's the message that I wanted to pass on. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tenzin. Ziaul Hasan, what is your final message for both Biden summit and also for COP26?
Yes, I want to see the pragmatic role of President Joe Biden. I hope that under the leadership of the US government, all the major political countries will be convinced to make full payment of their fees. And we also would like to have a very positive role to be played by the UK presidency. We hope that the these nations, these countries will come to understand that if we are not truly committed in a true sense to combat the adverse impact of climate change, that will be disastrous for every nation. So we think that we will work on the basis of our perception that we need to unite together to have environment-friendly scenario for our citizens, for all the nations, and we come together to with firm commitment and with the collaboration and cooperation of all the nations with their best abilities and efforts and commitment to make a better future free of adverse climatic situation. So this is my expectation.
Thank you. Felix, what is your final message?
Well, my final message is actually to stakeholders, not to governments. I think that what happened in the US when President Trump pulled out or indicated he was going to pull out of the climate agreement created a coalition of the willing, particularly among business and local and state authorities, to try and deliver that. Now, I think we need that in the top 20 economies, at least, if not more. We need an alliance. For me, one of the big outcomes could be, which is not part of the text, but is the launching of platforms in the major economies where the business and the stakeholders will come together and will try and help governments not to hit 2 degrees, but maybe will make the difference between 2 degrees and 1.5 degrees.
Thank you. See, in the run-up to Copenhagen, I fondly remember that British Prime Minister Gordon Brown, Ed Miliband, who was at that time Environment and Climate Minister, and Ed David, they had a lot of fondness, and also President Obama, they had also consultation, and at times we are asked to support them, to galvanize the momentum. This time also Boris Johnson and President Biden, if they also try to pull some other leaders of different continents, different groups or countries, that will also help build a momentum. So that at COP26 we can have a productive COP. We can the target net zero or strong, steep, deep cut, and also raising ambitions, not only mitigation ambitions, but also adaptation ambitions, finance ambitions, technology transfer, capacity building, and also loss and damage. Because Warsaw International Mechanism, I negotiated that of the least developed countries at that point of time. And we try to create this institution, try to build it, try to galvanize that momentum, try to deliver it, because many countries, the most vulnerable countries, least developed countries, AOCs, African countries, they are suffering. We are now the ground zero. So how to rescue these people? Millions of people, tens of millions of people. How to rescue them from ground zero? That is a Herculean task, and we have to deliver that. We have to rescue them collectively. So multilateralism is the winner at the end of the day. So we have to build trust. So how to build that trust and keep the momentum? High Commissioner Robert, your final word.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think you know, this has been incredibly interesting and useful discussion. It's been a reminder of how many stakeholders there are. But I think, I mean, the process is there. You know, I think if you look at where the stars are aligned now compared to where they were aligned a few months ago, it's completely different. The global alignment is completely different. I mean, you've got, as you've said, you've got Boris Johnson and Joe Biden, so two leaders who are very different in many ways, but are passionately committed on this agenda. They've got very good people working for them. You've got Alex Sharma as the COP president designate, who I'm very keen to get to Bangladesh. So he wants to come. if we didn't keep having these travel restrictions, he would have been already, and I'm sure he will be coming soon. He is very enthusiastic. We've just had Secretary Kerry here. And I think, you can sort of see the sequence from, the meetings that we've already had, the Biden summit, the G7, the G20 Glasgow, and you can sort of see how this can work. And I do think the nature of the conversation is different this time. I mean, I wasn't closely involved in climate diplomacy at the time of Paris, but I just think there's an urgency now. All over the world, wherever you look, there are these signs of climatic dislocation, climatic disaster. You hear it all the time in Bangladesh from people who say, well, 20 years ago, there was a predictability to the climate here, which has completely vanished, and we can all see the effects of that. So I do think there is a recognition that, as a humanity, we are facing this enormous challenge, and that we have the opportunity to do something about it. And clearly the geopolitics, the vested interests, lots of barriers, but I do think there is a real, and particularly among young people, there's a real understanding of why this issue is important. And there's a framework that should enable us to prevail, even though obviously it's much harder to do diplomacy this year than it normally would be. If we can do something like get everybody in the room at the time of G20, keep them in the room, don't let them leave until you then fly them in sealed aircraft to Glasgow and unleash them on the global, something like that. I think, there is a sort of sense that, people understand the importance, the structures and frameworks are there, the global conversation is there. We as the UK are incredibly committed to making this happen. It's our big thing this year. I probably spend more time on climate as an issue in my time as High Commissioner in Bangladesh than I do on almost any other issue. And it's fantastically important and exciting. So anyway, let's see if we can do it.
So it was a great pleasure to have this conversation with great minds. You have reflected on from different perspectives, from different continents and country groups. So hope that President Joe Biden's climate summit will be successful, and also G7, G20, and also other groups have their productive meetings, and that will help galvanize the momentum to reach to Glasgow in come November COP26, and that will be a successful one. With that optimism, I would like to close this conversation for today. Hopefully, we will have a couple of other conversations on COP26 and also climate summit next week. So with that, I would like to close this conversation for today. Thank you very much. If that was a great optimism, I would like to close this conversation for today. Hopefully, we will have a couple of other conversations on COP26 and also climate summit next week. So with that, I would like to close this conversation for today. Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to have you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Secretary. Tenzin, thank you for joining. Raju, thank you.